Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Kara Golden. I'm the Director of Marketing with Tiger Home and Building Inspections. And we are here today for all about well water, contaminants, tests, and treatments. Also on the program today is Sue Fasciani, our marketing manager, and also Joe DeLaurentis, our main presenter today. So if you're not familiar with Tiger and Joe, he is the owner of Tiger Inspections. He's a licensed home inspector for 26 years. He also has his pest control license for wood destroying insects. He's a member of ASHI, and he has a background in new construction, remodeling, and just has extensive knowledge in the latest construction innovations. So any of your home inspection questions, we're happy to answer, as well, of course, those about well water. A little bit about who we are as a company. If you're not familiar with us, we are a Connecticut family business. Our father, Joe, and I are siblings, started the business in 1992, and we have a commercial division as well as our residential inspections, and we inspect 7 days a week because we were all out there working 7 days a week. We work statewide in Connecticut and in the bordering towns in New York, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. A few things just to separate us from other companies that you should know about. The wood destroying insect, all of our inspectors carry that license, and it's included free with all of your standard home inspections. We also use radon monitors, electronic monitors for our radon testing. The best part about that is we have a certified staff that goes out and does our radon testing, and they have e-keys for your convenience as well if you want us to enter the property without having to make an appointment with you. And of course, we obviously offer well water testing, which we're going to talk about today, mold assessments and testing. And then there's our home inspectors. They have different specialties in different areas. So if there's something in particular you're looking for, please talk to our office staff when you're scheduling, or feel free to contact Sue or myself, and we'd be happy to talk about that. Some of their specialties are 203K HUD consultant, if you're involved in renovation loans, antique home specialist, different types of new construction specialists, equestrian properties, and more. So I'm going to hand it over to Joe. Just a couple other things today. I do ask that you chat in your questions. We will take breaks throughout the presentation, and Sue will read those questions aloud. We are videotaping this program today, and it'll be available to you on our YouTube channel. Also, there'll be a follow-up email that I send out with those links and any handouts we talk about during the presentation today. Thanks, Joe.
Good morning. Thank you, Kara. Thank you, Sue. Welcome, everyone. Before we get to today's agenda, just a quick reminder on Connecticut Realtor Association. Very little changes in COVID policies regarding masks. They are still suggesting, due to home occupants, sellers, et cetera, people that may not be vaccinated yet, that masks still be worn on properties. We've seen changes, evolution in over a year of conducting business during the pandemic. Things have loosened up quite a bit, but CTR has not followed suit with the changes in Connecticut. So just a quick reminder for everyone on that. Today's agenda, the focus is well water testing. We're effectively going to look at a test. What do we do with those results? What do the results mean? What types of treatment can address these tests? And you'll see some of these treatments may overlap. And then talk about some of the potential cost ranges for those treatments. The well water types of tests you can see on the screen there, running from basic potability into some more involved testing. In the early days of my career in home inspection over 25 years ago, we as inspectors at Tiger drew our own water samples. Looking back, it was a little bit of a circus trying to make sure you had all the right bottles. Most of the testing was a simple potability test. And then, of course, we had to keep them in a cooler and try to find a laboratory at an appropriate time to get those waters in for the lab's testing requirements and move on from there. Over time, due to clients' concerns, obviously the media's input, as well as a huge influence of people being able to do research on the internet, we have much more involved tests. We have clients that strive to get more and more information on well water. Today, our company, as Kara mentioned, has a team of environmental specialists. They're tasked with doing all of our radon and water testing. huge difference from what it was 25 years ago. They're stocked with all of the different water bottles and ability to test for many of the things we're going to talk about today, or all of the things I should say. Additionally, testing has improved dramatically, and we'll touch on some of those details there. Things like carrying alcohol wipes, chlorine tabs to test after chlorination and such. Connecticut well water, 23% of the residents in Connecticut have private wells. So there's still a fair amount of wells out there on the properties that you'll be selling. Understand that the states regulate well water testing. It is not regulated by the EPA, and that includes radon water, which we'll touch on. Private residents are responsible for monitoring their own well water. With the influx of people moving into Connecticut from cities and such in this last year or so, we see some misunderstanding about that. They're used to public water. They're used to somebody else monitoring and maintaining their water. So some of this comes as a surprise for individuals who haven't owned homes before. The Connecticut Health Department is the authority. Additionally, local health departments can increase requirements beyond what the state has, but not reduce those requirements. So when do we test for well water? Well, some people test just to check on their well, and we'll look at the chart from the DPH to keep up with that. However, it's done normally at the time of sale. So that can be something that people will do in order to check the house, i.e. during their home inspection process. It's also required for newly constructed wells. And remember that that's not just a new construction home, that's any new well that's installed. Actually, I believe after you frack a well, you're also required to test it as well. Fracking is a way to try to get the well to produce more water. You'll see some of these requirements change. As an example, I mentioned that local health departments may have more stringent requirements. In the Farmington Valley, not only do they require the basic potability testing, but they also extend that to add pesticides and VOCs, or volatile organic chemicals. However, down, if you look at a shoreline town like Madison, it's just basic potability to satisfy that new well. Additionally, in the real estate transaction, you may have some loans that require testing. The best advice I can give you for your clients is to ask the lender early. The sooner you find out what's going to be required, and it does vary. We have always wished that FHA and VA and other organizations, USDA as an example, would have a simple list of what they require, but we find it's extremely variable. So ask early is the best I can say. We often get last minute closing phone calls. We need to run out and do this extra water sample that the lender is now requiring. So what do the local health departments have to do with this? Well, each water test that's submitted to a state registered laboratory has to be submitted to the local town. That's also an advantage for you in real estate. You can go check on those prior tests as well as they were recorded. I mentioned the new construction, the fact that local health departments may require more. Also something that's good for you to be aware of in the local markets that you may work in. And some of the advanced testing we'll touch on has moved into VOCs, pesticides, and of course the arsenic and uranium that we've seen in the media recently. Actually, what kind of spurred our thoughts to create this presentation for you all. Review those local requirements so that you're aware of what your clients may run into. So moving on to the first test, as I mentioned, this is kind of the core test that we've been doing for a long time. It's for sure the minimum requirement that will be for a newly constructed well. The little stars next to coliform bacteria and nitrate nitrogen, those are the two that will trigger a not safe for drinking indication on the lab results. Those are the only two here. The others affect the way the water tastes, the way the water looks, and maybe the impact it may have on plumbing, be that fixtures and/or pipes in the house. For instance, things that stain appliances, dishwashers and such, commonly the manganese, hard water, iron and water, and then of course the aerators on your faucets and showers and such get some of that calcium type buildup on them as well. We added hardness to the list. Some labs report on it, others just report on calcium and magnesium. The two of those together are what typically make up hardness as well. It's also the most common conversation. A lot of our Connecticut towns tend to have hard water, high iron in water, and therefore the most common treatment system we see is a water softener. And we'll talk some more about those as well. You get into treatment of bacteria. Again, this is one that will trigger that not safe for drinking. We usually start in most of our markets with a chlorination. And the typical method there is generally gauge how much water is in the well. You add the correct amount based on water volume of chlorination, flush the system. So it's run through from the pump all the way through all the fixtures in the house to clean everything, including treatment systems. And then once it's purged completely of the chlorine, that water can be retested to see if it was successful. Before treating that, of course, a well system company would look for any obvious signs of the bacteria cause. Is there a wellhead that's buried? Is there a well cap that's not working right? Maybe there's simply a treatment system in line that hasn't been maintained. But solving that problem rather than just going to chlorination is a key factor as well. If there's a chronic or repeating bacteria problem, one can go to a permanent chlorination system, such as you see in the right image. That basically, to simplify it, drops chlorine tabs in on an intermittent basis to keep the water chlorinated. We don't see many of those. I maybe have seen 2 or 3 of those in over 25 years. It's an interesting system. It's a successful system. It's used a lot in other markets in our country. For full-time full-time bacteria issues, ultraviolet light is a more common system. We do see a fair amount of those installed. That has increased probably in the last 10 or 15 years for those that are extremely concerned or want guaranteed clean water. And the most common place we see those is on a shallow well, which are much more prone to influences of groundwater, rainwater, potentially the well casing itself allows organic material to get in there. So ultraviolet light systems do need yearly maintenance. You replace the bulb. That's not drastically expensive, somewhere between $100 and $200 for bulb replacement there. And then there's the most common system. This will treat the majority not the majority of, but many of the items on that basic potability test. That's our ion exchange or water softening system. And we have a tank here with the softening media in it, and then another tank here for cleansing. You've probably heard discussion and had experiences in transactions with the backwash from these systems. So the Connecticut Health Code, for 3 reasons, does not allow the backwash from softeners and in some cases other systems to enter into the septic system. You've probably heard this called out by a septic inspection. The reasons are the volume of water that's added to the septic system. It wasn't designed to handle the influence of the treatment backwash. Also, it can impact the solids breakdown and or create some concrete deterioration. Our tanks and distribution boxes and such in the systems are made from concrete, which can be affected by the salt. So we see variation in that throughout the state. Again, a takeaway for you, if you take a listing and it has a well, ask if it has a treatment system, find out ahead of time if that backwash is to the septic, and stay ahead of it so that you can address potentially putting in a separate leaching system for it, routing it, if allowed, in health departments to another drain, and or maybe changing the system to something that doesn't backwash. But staying ahead of it is helpful before the buyers go ahead and in some cases get expensive prices for adding a backwash system. Another treatment system that can handle many of the contaminants on this basic potability is reverse osmosis. You'll hear RO or reverse osmosis throughout the presentation, a very conclusive system. If one wanted, again, a guarantee as it may be of clean water. You'll see a lot of these at point of use, kitchen sink in most cases with a separate little tap, a very successful way to be sure that you have clean water. And effectively what we're doing is instead of just running water through a filter, it's pressurized and pushed through a media filter and then run up through the house. Full whole house systems can get very expensive. So a lot of these point of use systems are put in to handle some simple issues. If we get into some of the bigger issues to handle, i.e. metals and things, a whole house system can get expensive. Common filtration systems and their average cost range. There are big spreads in this because most of these are designed based on those water results, and there are various methods as well to do this. Water softeners can run the gamut from the ion exchange system that I mentioned to you to other systems that take care of hard water in different ways and don't have the backwash. So roughly 1,000 to up over 4,000. Reverse osmosis, you see a huge range there because that handles that point of use or one sink all the way up to whole house. And then of course, there are other point of use, charcoal type systems and such. And there's a big variation on those. And then lastly, neutralizers that will handle that pH or acidic water that can impact plumbing. You'll also see and hear us talk about neutralizers added to some systems. Sometimes we have to correct a heavy metals problem. The result is acidic water. Therefore, a neutralizer goes on after that system. So systems on top of systems are what drives some of these solutions and therefore prices as well. Sue, do we have any questions?
Yes, Joe, I have a couple questions. The first one was really just a clarification. I think they just want a clarification on, do towns have different requirements for water, well water?
Yes, they do. As we referenced, you'll see variations in different towns. Those requirements are for newly constructed wells, though. They don't have different requirements for real estate transactions or for what a homeowner has to test. There are no requirements specifically for what people have to do other than those newly constructed wells.
Okay, and then does public water eliminate all of these risks?
Effectively, it does. Public water, to address the bacteria part of it, is chlorinated. And it's funny because people that come from public water don't recognize or notice the chlorination and are very worried about wells. I've never lived any place that didn't have a well. So for me, public water, to me, I smell the chlorine in it, and I'd rather be drinking well water. So yes, it handles all of that. Radon in water is not an issue because of the natural aeration of transporting that water from a reservoir or a tower through the piping. Also, the public water companies will analyze and test for all of these contaminants that we're speaking about today in their water sources. And most importantly, if you're purchasing a house on city water, that local water authority will provide you with the results when requested. And that's good information to get when purchasing a house.
Okay, and one more question. What could the reason be for having bacteria in well water?
So there are many sources. Depends first on type of well. I referenced quickly a drilled well with a steel casing. We see, you probably noticed those steel casings sticking up out of the ground at a house. Sometimes it's as simple as that casing being too close to the ground. Organic material can get in there, leaves, grass from mowing the lawn. Potentially, I don't want to gross anyone out near breakfast here, but potentially field mice or other animals. And that stuff is the bacteria source. On the shallow well side of things, there's a big variation in what we see. Many of our antique homes in Connecticut still have an old stone a well, therefore heavily influenced by rainwater. A lot of people go right to the influence of potentially a bad septic system, possible, but not likely unless there's some significant failure in the septic or the well and septic are too close together. So little bit of variation on what can cause it, but that's where treatment and retesting come in to confirm, along with finding out the sources.
All right, and there was one question that snuck in. So this is my last one for bacteria. Are there ways to know that you might need to test for bacteria? Example, would somebody experiencing, an illness, or would there be any notable changes in the water?
Not likely any notable changes that you would smell or taste or color for bacteria. Health-wise, yes, that's the ultimate concern. I don't know that you would immediately think, oh, it's going to be my well water, but maybe after chasing an illness for some time, your doctor may recommend testing your water. That's probably the only way one would lead to that. But testing the water is the best way to determine whether there's any bacteria source in there. And any bit of it that shows up is certainly recommended to be treated. It affects people differently. Some people have lived in a house for a long time, and as we know, some of our bodies get very used to exposure to bacteria. Others may come from a very clean environment and they're not used to it and are immediately impacted by it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Joe.
Sure. So moving on to additional tests. We'll talk about radon in water. We do have a full seminar on radon in water and radon air, so I won't dig too deeply in that unless there's questions. Of course, lead for older homes is a question there. Volatile organic chemicals, arsenic and uranium has come up again in the media, and we will talk specifically about that. There's a link that will be sent out regarding that video that was on the local news. And then pesticides and herbicides, predominantly for specific areas of homes there. Radon in well water, of course, the exposure is known to be cancer causing. The most important takeaway here for you that's often confusing is the exposure to radon water is from breathing the air, not unlike radon in air exposure. So it's not from ingestion. Radon is the second leading cause of lung cancer in the US, and the way it gets into water and or the air in our homes is through the decay of what we call radon decay particles. So that's how the breakdown occurs. When there's high concentrations down inside the earth that contain uranium, that breaks down, and as the water passes through it, effectively we get radon in our water. That's then released into the house by running household fixtures, predominantly in the shower. A poorly vented bathroom is probably the worst case scenario. You have all that water all steamed up in there, but also running other fixtures in the house creates a natural accumulation there as well. The important thing to note with uranium is there's no direct correlation on that uranium test that we're going to talk about. It's wise to test for both. Radon, of course, does occur from the breakdown of that uranium-238, but we don't know where that exposure is for the well. So we could be getting radon in somewhere else in that drilled well or aquifer, and uranium influence from somewhere else before it was broken down. So best is to test for both. Same goes for the radon air discussion. Always important to test your radon air as well as your radon water. We don't use the age-old formula anymore of adding your radon water amounts to your air, but it's important to know both because the exposure is different. Radon air, of course, is tested in the lowest area that's suitable for living in a home, and our radon water can impact us in many areas of the house wherever we're running water through those household activities. Our average concentration throughout the country is less than 1,000 picocuries. That jumps up when you get to the Northeast. We are in an area where it's more prominent, and you'll see the bottom bullet there, Connecticut's average radon level from a bunch of data that was accumulated years ago is 3,000 picocuries. We spoke earlier about different levels in different states. Remember, there is no EPA guideline. Radon Air has an EPA guideline of 4 picocuries. There is no EPA guideline for water. Connecticut and many other states have created their own. In Connecticut, it's 5,000 picocuries in private well water. The other key takeaway on radon for you is the Connecticut Department of Health recommends a dual vial sample for radon water testing. This is important. Our fees in some cases may seem higher for radon water than our competitors and or well water companies. If they're using a single vial sample, the state recommends that you do not mitigate based on a single vial sample. So our sample is a dual vial sample. That way we're satisfying the state recommendations and getting our clients all the information. If a single vial sample comes back high, the first step for you should not be to go ahead and try to remediate. It should be for a second test. And that can be done by a service provider and or the person who's designing the potential mitigation system to be installed. So important takeaway on radon water testing. Circle all the way back to the old days of when we as inspectors started doing radon water before the Department of Health was very strict with this recommendation. These are the things that we've learned and trained with our specific staff over the years to address all of these tests in the most appropriate manner so that our clients get accurate information for their real estate transactions. So treatment for radon water can be 2 different systems, the first of which handles lower levels. 5,000 to 10,000 is a common discussion. In our service areas, we hear some service providers stopping at 8,000 with this treatment. Part of the reason for that is these canisters do require yearly service, so they get changed out on a yearly basis. And as these numbers get higher, they have to be changed more in sooner periods, so it doesn't make as much sense. Costs less than $2,000 in most markets, and that's what the canisters will look like. These are labeled, which is awesome. Many of them are not, and you may see a single granular activated carbon or a dual setup here. While we're on the slide, of course, you see your standard pressure tank. That blue tank is part of the well pumping system and on all of our well systems, not a treatment system. As the numbers get higher, we move into aeration systems. These systems are highly effective. 99% of the radon is removed. They do get very expensive. So radon water treatment for aeration, as you get up over that 10,000 picocurie marker, falls into 4,000 to 6,000 range, depending on design of that system. The basic layout here, the large black box is an aeration chamber. Effectively, we're bubbling the water, and then the white pipe running out the top evacuates that air out again above the roof line, just like a radon air system. The water is then repressurized and pumped up into the house. So you can see where all of the expense comes from there. These systems should be checked periodically. A yearly basis would be ideal, and keep those up and running. Moving on to lead water samples. The key here, again, like most of the things we're talking about, you can't see, taste, or smell any of the lead in water. It is naturally occurring down inside the earth. The natural occurrence in wells is not normally the primary source, but it can contribute to elevated levels. So testing should include, in some cases, the source of the water, as well as, if age appropriate, which we'll talk about in a moment, the plumbing inside the house. The key here is testing for children, infants and such in development, not unlike our lead paint concerns. Elevated lead, can cause brain, kidney, and other development issues in children. So houses that children reside in are most important to test. Back to our reverse osmosis or RO treatment. This gives you a little better idea of what I was talking about. Our tap water comes in one side, it's pressurized and pushed through that media filter there to clean. And then, of course, our pure water comes out the other end. There are some options, reverse osmosis, carbon filters, distillation and such for treatment of lead there. Again, point of use is a good way to go. Additionally, purging the water if it's potentially just an old house plumbing issue is a good practice as well. Just running your water before you fill up that coffee maker or take your first glass of water in the morning. Lead and first draw, I'll be honest with you, for our staff, starting with our office staff and onto our environmental team, is a difficult test to draw. It's a great idea health-wise for homeowners. It's difficult in a real estate transaction. We need the not run for at least 6 hours in a property. And I know that can be hard, particularly in today's current world where a lot of people are working from home. So just a heads up on this, we will work with realtors on the buyer side and or listing side and homeowners to do our best to get these tests done. It does take some coordination on that. And many of our clients, due to, again, the media, the Flint, Michigan things that came out in the last few years, had increased interest in this lead water testing. So 1986 is the number. That's when lead-based solder was removed from the market. However, our Connecticut DPH recognizes that this could still be in use for years after. So they recommend testing into the early 1990s. And what we're testing for is a lead solder that connected the pipes and or any lead pipe in older houses and potentially in fixtures in homes there as well. That first draw applies to both wells and municipal water. There's the top right with that stagnant water for 6 hours. The action level you'll see on your results is 15 micrograms. And then also suggested to test for some of the corrosive properties with the wells, because some of that can actually clean the pipes and allow the water to get down to be exposed by that lead solder that may or may not be there, the lead included in some of these fixtures as well. One thing I would recommend for you is if a test does come back high, we're going to test the most common point of use, which is usually a kitchen sink if we have an appropriate faucet. We may then go to a primary use bathroom as a second test, but should that first draw come back higher than recommended, in my opinion, the best case is to do more testing. Try to figure out then, is it in the pipes? Is it just in that fixture that I tested? Maybe I should test all the bathrooms or the one that the children are going to be using. Maybe it's as simple as changing a fixture, a sink fixture, kitchen faucet, a bathroom faucet. Maybe it includes some piping, rather than having your clients jump on the internet and start thinking they need to replace all the pipes in the house. Arsenic and uranium, everybody's new favorite, again, since it came out in the media. Where did this all stem from? Well, it started a long time ago. In 2013, the U.S. Geological Survey started gaining information regarding wells. In Connecticut, they say nearly 4% of the wells have high arsenic levels, and nearly 5% of the wells have higher concentrations of uranium than these EPA guidelines. And we will follow up with some email information for you on these two subjects as well. As a result of this USGA survey, the Connecticut state officials recommend that private well owners test their wells. We saw a run-up of concerned real estate clients, as well as those outside of real estate transactions doing testing. Incidentally, more and more we're doing testing for homeowners, and we welcome that work. The DPH does have periodic testing cycles that we'll go through, and many homeowners continue to test their water, particularly when there are children in the homes. So there's that 2013 study. They recommend testing when a new well is drilled. That may be required again by some local health departments. It's not by the state. At the time of sale is another time that they recommend testing. And then after that, it's every 5 years after a test is done. So there is a cycle for arsenic and uranium testing to be done. What happens with uranium in the water? So it's a radioactive element, normally occurs again down in that bedrock and is absorbed into the water. The health effects from the uranium may include internal, such as kidney damage, and because it's considered radioactive, of course, it's a potential carcinogen as well. This map is kind of hard to see on the slide. This is the USGS results. So if you're curious about it, you can go on their website and kind of zoom it in to see a little bit better. But the takeaway here, the colors are the percentage of wells that came in higher than the EPA guideline, which is 30 micrograms per liter. So 30% over 30 grams are the darker red. So just some little pockets in areas. The 1 to 10%, which is the preponderance of the color there, is all of the pink, and then 11 to 20%, some of these stripes of the orange as well. The little circles and other indicators in the legend are tests that were done more recently, and some little pockets of high levels that came back. So what do we do with high uranium? Again, there's our reverse osmosis, or we may use an ion resin system, anion, which effectively works like that ion exchange, but the opposite direction. Things can get expensive with these systems. They can be point of use, or they can be whole house on the anion side. Couple notes there, that does backwash. So if that property does not already have a backwashing system and or a dry well for it, there's an additional expense that may be incurred. Additionally, this is one that the water could be acidic on the outside, outgoing side of it. You may need to add a neutralizer to the system. So you can see in some cases how these prices can compound as well for these treatments. There are some of our costs. It does vary based on the water result. So as the results get higher, of course, we need more treatment, and therefore the prices range there increase with the amount in the results. Moving on to arsenic, a similar graph was provided from USGS of Connecticut. Same colors and percentages apply. However, it's 10 micrograms per liter for their testing. And again, this 1 to 10% is most of what we're seeing. Some pockets of this 11 to 20% of the tests done came back over that guideline, and just some sections there that tested for it. And water is a component down inside the earth. In order for it to get in the water, it combines with some of the other metals and or sulfur to get in your water. Most of the labs don't recognize if there's high sulfur or other metals that you should run and test for arsenic, but they do recommend that dependently. It's naturally present. We're not talking about any contamination or anything like that. The health effects for it are on the shorter term, potentially nausea, vomiting, some cardiovascular effects on the longer term, as well as brain effects. Ingestion of this water may lead to some other skin issues or nervous system things in the long term there. Mitigation options, other than the use of the anion exchange or reverse osmosis, there are some proprietary systems. This is MetSorb. It's an absorptive media filter. So we're passing the water through a media filter to clean it. And this MetSorb system is one that we pulled up just to give you an example of one proprietary system for removal of this arsenic as a heavy metal. So there's a diagram for you of how that one works. Again, the cost will vary based on the size of the system. So if you had to put in 1 2 cubic foot filter, you're in that less than 2,000 range. As you jump up into systems that need 2 filters, potentially 1.5 cubic foot design. We jump up into the over 4,000 range there. If you had to go reverse osmosis on this for a whole house, like it shows here, things get expensive. Takeaways on arsenic: again, you're not going to taste it or smell it when you're drinking or running your water. These levels can fluctuate. That's part of why the DPH recommends that 5-year periodic testing. The DPH does recommend testing for new wells at the time of a real estate transaction, and again, that every 5 years. However, they tighten that time frame up. You see this second to last bullet here. They recommend annual testing if you have a treatment system in place. So, moving on to pesticides in well water. Sue, do we have any questions on anything?
Yes, we do. Going back to radon, and we always have questions about radon, right? That's why we came up with that special presentation we have. The first question is kind of a 2-part question. Are radon levels in water higher at certain times of year? And is there a better time to test for radon in water?
The radon water levels will not be impacted by time of year like radon air, and I don't want to divert too far off into radon air. So short answer is no. However, well water usage may impact it. So if a house has been vacant for some period of time, let's say the occupants went away for the winter to warmer climates, and we're dealing with water that's all the way up to its highest capacity in a well potentially, we may get a different sample than if they're at home using water all the time. Maybe there's a lawn irrigation system and the well sitting down in its lower levels. You're effectively getting water from different areas in the well. So that's one influence, but time of year will not impact it. But certainly different water levels may.
Okay, and is the amount of radon in the water dependent on temperature?
No. So temperature doesn't impact either.
Okay, all right. And as far as arsenic, you talked about arsenic and uranium. Are those found together? So if you have one, is it assumed you have the other, or?
They're not typically found together. However, because they're both heavy metals, they're often tested together. So if you had uranium in a well, it wouldn't mean that you're going to have arsenic. They being both heavy metals, they did the studies of them together, and we've recognized the concern for them together. So package them. One of our tests is an arsenic uranium combination test, and the laboratories recognize them as well together. So that's why they're somewhat married in testing.
Okay, and one more question in regards to arsenic. Is arsenic found more frequently in land that was previously used for farming?
No, but that cues us right into pesticides here. This is one test that would be impacted by land use, so we can segue into the pesticides here as well. So not on the arsenic, no. Naturally occurring mineral, and just recommended to be tested throughout the state of Connecticut. I would not get too deeply into those maps. In other words, what town am I in and what were the test results? There's enough of it in Connecticut and enough variation in those maps that the DPH and the USGS survey results recommend that the wells be tested.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Great. So on to pesticides. You'll see the top circle here addresses what our attendee asked as a question. If it's in an area susceptible to contamination, there may be a history of pesticide use. There may be nearby ongoing use, potentially golf course, orchards, prior farm that was turned into a housing development. So these are all places that pesticide testing would be important. This can also be treated with that reverse osmosis system in some cases. And one indicator from the basic potability test would be high concentrations of nitrate, nitrogen. I think many of you are aware that the nitrogen-based pesticides would be what triggers that there. So the laboratory may not come right out and say it in your results, but a high nitrate nitrogen would trigger a recommendation for pesticide testing. This testing, as well as what we're going to move on to next, the VOCs, does get quite a bit more expensive. And one of the last slides is a little chart of our well water testing prices. And, so areas of concern, these are important. We do see some clients who just run the gamut of these tests because of personal concerns. But again, this one is usually focused on geographic location. VOCs are somewhat similar in that. So volatile organic chemicals cover a lot of our fuel oils, solvents, paints, dyes, cleaners. The results for these can be somewhat overwhelming. It's a very, very long list for any of us that are not chemists are a little bit overwhelmed by. But the ease of reading is because they'll indicate which ones are out of line per se. The EPA has qualifications for these and limits for these. They do say that VOCs are present in a fifth of our nation's water supply. So there can be a lot of unknowns, and historical use is important. Are you buying a house in a development near a gas station or some other sort of fuel storage? And maybe it's one of the commercial properties we work in where there was some industrial use previously, and they're still on a well in a rural area there. So treatment methods depend on which of these many volatile organic chemicals come up. So not a straightforward, simple treatment for all, catch-all for all of them, but some variation there. So these are usually point of use treatments rather than whole house, just to confirm clean drinking water. One example, is a carbon filter. So not unlike our GAC canisters for the radon, these activated carbon filters, there's a smaller example on the screen there of a point of use. These point of use systems may be around $80 up to $200, and then whole house systems can be run up into the $2,000 range, not unlike our GAC, granular activated carbon for radon. Fluoride in well water, we don't often get requests to test. The most common for this is when a client has their children at the dentist, and the dentist will recommend having the fluoride checked, see if it's naturally occurring in the well water, or if they need to introduce some pet medicine or some such to add fluoride tablets to their diet. I was surprised when I first started learning about fluoride to know that it can be too high. So you see the middle circle here indicates that you can cause some issues with the fluoride being too high. And again, the advice is for testing for children under 12 that may be residing in a property. So we see more of this for our homeowner clients than in real estate transactions, but wanted to just touch on it because it is offered from the laboratories as well. If you had to reduce it, then back to that reverse osmosis, most of it would be point of use because you want to deal with drinking water, could be activated carbon, or if you wanted whole house, you could go to that anion system. Again, that would drive the expense up quite a bit for that. So what does the DPH say? The Connecticut Department of Health recommended guideline. And I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but they redid their website some years ago. It's very informative, easy to follow now, and has these charts here to recommend the cycles for testing. Great reference for your clients in a real estate transaction to understand well water testing versus some of the other stuff out there on the internet, which can create some increased concerns for clients. So basic profile or potability, they recommend doing that once a year. Lead in the source that we spoke about, that'd be one time. Radon, uranium, arsenic all fall into that every 5-year cycle. However, remember, if you're treating for the arsenic or uranium, they want you to test that on a yearly basis if you have had a high result that triggered treatment. VOCs and pesticides would be one time, however, could be an ongoing testing if there's an issue. In my neighborhood of 5 houses, 2 of the houses had an issue with high VOCs, and it was deemed to be related to an abandoned rail bed nearby that's owned by the state. Therefore, the state was doing testing and mitigation on 2 properties. They were required to maintain the systems as well as what they put in the GAC granular activated carbon systems, as well as yearly testing was done there. So you can see how that ongoing monitoring occurs. And then the fluoride would be if children under 12 are in the property every 5 years. This is our chart of costs of tests. So the basic potability test, we run $135. Our radon water for the 2 vial. Remember, the takeaway on the 2 vial sample is $105. Arsenic, uranium combined in a package is $200. If you did them separately, they're a little bit higher than that total. Lead water sampling, $85. And then pesticides, VOCs, you see jump up in price there. And there's your fluoride at $80. So we can bundle those for you. The advantages to this are people get packaging and prices. Some of these do include your radon air as well. There's your basic package. We also offer an additional functional flow test. We give price reductions on those flow tests if those are requested. Our flow test is a 1-hour test of the well. The first 15 minutes are testing performance inside the house to see well pressure and performance throughout the building, beginning to look at the performance of the system, and then looking at the pressure tank on the system, the well pumping components that are accessible. Of course, the submersible pump we won't be able to see or listen to, but watching how that system cycles. From there, we move on to running a hose outside with a gauge, and we get readings of pressure in gallons per minute throughout the balance of the 45-minute test. All of this deems whether or not the house has sufficient water for normal household usage. Are there any issues with those components that are in place? In a home inspection or our functional flow test, we don't include inspection of the treatment systems. So we always advise people get in touch with the service provider, find out if it's owned or rented. Another good takeaway for your listing preparations. Get those systems checked. They're often sitting unserviced. Many of the softeners don't have any salt pellets in them. And we don't know if they're owned or rented, staying with the property, etc. The Better Living package, to move back to our packages, is a $75 saving, and that one adds the arsenic and uranium to the basic package. And then our Healthy Family package additionally adds that functional flow test into that package, as well as the lead water sampling. So there's some packages for both our real estate clients as well as our homeowner clients. When choosing home inspection companies, we always close with some tips for our referring realtors as well as their clients. Price alone should not be the consideration. We always stress that service is more important than price reduction. Also confirming that inspectors are fully licensed. I say that because there's an intern program in Connecticut. When we were licensed in the early 2000s, they set up a program where an inspector has to go through an intern program of 100 inspections under a licensed individual after completing a 40-hour course and then moving on to taking the final exam. You are able to own and operate a business in Connecticut under that intern permit without being fully licensed. So a good question to ask when comparing credentials. Insurance is even more important to ask because Connecticut does not require insurance for home inspectors. Some of our bordering states do. New York requires errors and omissions, and Massachusetts has some requirements as well. In addition to the errors and omissions, which is most commonly asked about, Liability insurance is very important, as well as workers' compensation insurance for any employees that are on site. I wouldn't be telling you any of this if we didn't carry all of that as a responsible business. Full service is important. We've referenced our environmental team. They are all NRPP, or the National Radon Proficiency Program certified. Not unlike your Realtor CE, they're required to do 8 hours of continuing ed every year to refresh any changes in radon practices. They have monthly meetings with their team in order to stay up to date on all of the Department of Health and laboratory water testing requirements, and continue to improve our services. So it's important that these tests get done properly in order to move through the real estate transaction. We've worked very hard over all these years, nearly 30 now, to create our reputation and our credentials and our experience to service our clients, and they're representing realtors professionally. Sue, any other questions?
Yeah, Joe, 2 more questions came in. One goes back to the basic water test. Why are high levels of iron and manganese in water a concern?
So those are predominantly a concern. Manganese can cause staining and such on fixtures. That's again, back to those dishwashers, showers and such. You've probably seen tile and fiberglass shower walls and such that have some staining on them. So the iron is very similar. It's more of a color issue. That one, actually, you'll see it if you fill up a glass of water in some high iron circumstances as well.
Okay, and lastly, can someone do their own water testing and take it to the lab?
Yes, someone could. I see some interesting variations of methods on this. Over all the years, I've seen some clients bring their own glass jars, everything from a mason jar to a Tupperware container. And our staff has the actual bottles that are labeled for each specific test from the laboratory. So bacteria, most importantly, comes in a sealed plastic vial. So getting the right equipment is extremely important. But in addition to that, knowing how to take the test is very important. And that starts with choosing the right faucet. Little tips like, does it separate the hot and cold water? Is it a single handle faucet, which is not as good for testing? Do you move on to another primary point of use like a bathroom to get the right faucet? Remove the aerator, cleanse that with an alcohol swab. Maybe there was chlorination done. Do they have the chlorine tablets to make sure that all the chlorine is out of the water? Do they go downstairs and look at the treatment system before drawing the samples? These are all the things that we've developed with our environmental team over the years so that we get the tests done appropriately. From there, they got to be kept in a cooler and delivered to the laboratory in a timely manner. So yes, they could. However, in discussions with people, by the time I get done telling them all that, and the fact that they then have to drive back to the laboratory with them, they find that our fees are quite within reason and end up having a professional like our environmental team do the tests.
Great, thank you.
Sure. So my name is Joe DeLaurentis. Again, I'm happy to help you with anything that you run into. Take a picture with your phone, send an email to us. Kara Golden is on the call as well. She's our director of marketing. Sue Fasciani is our marketing manager. Please reach out to us if you have any questions, be it well water or anything else you run into that's home inspection or commercial building inspection related. Thank you all for your attendance. And if you remain on for a moment, we'll have a raffle winner for our Panera gift card. These are historically lunch and learn events, so we still try to keep that theme and provide one of our attendees with a lunch gift certificate.
Thank you, Joe. So this is a new presentation for us. So I hope everybody found it valuable. So thank you everybody for joining us today. Our raffle winner is Jody Schulmeister. Congratulations, Jody. So I will send that out to you. And I'm wishing you all the best in your real estate endeavors. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Have a great day.